Welcome to Sip with Summers, the podcast where we talk about sex, intimacy, and pleasure. Because someone has to, and let's be honest, it may as well be me. I'm your host, Jennifer Marie Summers, board certified sexologist, certified sex coach, menopause coach, and your favorite inappropriate friend with a microphone. Around here, we cover everything from why is my libido ghosting me to is it normal to fantasize about pizza during sex? Spoiler alert, yes. So grab a drink and let's get into the good stuff because pleasure is your birthright and awkward is my love language. Let's spill, sip, and say the things most people whisper. Welcome to the show.
Today, we're going to be talking about the connection between pleasure, power, and the conditioning that has shaped how we experience both of those things. If you've ever felt disconnected from your body, unsure of your desire, or like something is off, this conversation is going to open some doors. Because here's the truth. Pleasure is not just about sex. It's about power and safety and how you experience yourself in your own body. I am so excited to welcome Kayla Moore to the podcast today. Kayla is a feminine liberation coach and a priestess in training. She's devoted to helping women reclaim pleasure, heal shame, and rise into their embodied power. She blends clinical sex therapy with sacred feminine practices, creating spaces where women reconnect with their bodies, their voices, and their truth through her coaching, courses, retreats, and community work. Kayla, I'm so excited for this conversation today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'd love to start with your story. What brought you into this work, Kayla?
Well, it has been quite a journey. I think if we take it all the way back, I grew up with a single mom after my parents split when I was about 6 years old. And our family has always been kind of ruled by the matriarchs for better and for worse. But I really learned from a young age that women did have power. And I went to an all-girls Catholic high school that I think a lot of people would be like, oh my gosh, that sounds incredibly intense. But it was actually the perfect place that I needed to be in that time of my life. It was really so freeing at that time to not have the pressure of like, how do I look in front of boys? We got to just like hang out, be who we wanted to be, explore what we wanted to explore, focus on our academics and also like who we wanted to be in the world without that pressure. And I don't know if I like consciously knew it at that time, but looking back, seeing most of the staff at our school were women. We had a woman principal. We had Black women in leadership at our school. And I think that was a big thing for me to see women in these, again, roles of power that were helping foster women, young women to like grow in themselves and really learn about themselves. So I think there's always been a bend for me in terms of really loving women empowerment and learning about feminism. I also did a minor in women, gender, and sexuality studies when I was in college, and then paired that with a major in psychology. And so I've always really wanted to understand, like, how did we get to where we are today? And how do we free ourselves from that? I've always had a heart that wanted to help others as well and really wanted to make the world a better place. I think that's always kind of been something that has been inside of me, of knowing like that is part of my path, is helping other people. So it was always kind of there. I never really was like, oh yeah, I want to be a sex therapist. But in my grad program, one of my professors was a sex therapist, and that was kind of her whole body of work that she did. And she taught our human sexuality class, which was a class that everybody had to take, but she really tried to make it a little bit more robust for anyone that wanted to go down the path of sex therapy, that they would get a little bit more out of it for the certification that you need to go through to be a sex therapist. And I thought it was really cool to work specifically with sex, and was kind of tied into a lot of the things that I already was interested in. So I decided that was the path that I was going to take, becoming a sex therapist. It took me a long time to do. It's a long, big process to go through to do that certification, but it taught me so much. And I have loved working with individuals and couples. I feel like being a therapist has been something that I've been able to grow in myself while I am also helping the people that I'm helping, and also keeping a pulse on the different dynamics that are happening in society as well. I feel like, again, kind of the spiritual understanding of like as within, so without, or as above, so below. A lot of what is kind of happening as a macrocosm in our society is also happening as a microcosm within like a couple or in a household. And so seeing some of that play out over the time that I've been working with people is really cool, and just kind of seeing the evolution of things and what people really are struggling with. I believe 2024, I had what I think manifested, because I definitely wanted a office in downtown Gig Harbor. That's where I live, in Gig Harbor, Washington. And I just like dreamt of having my own office that was on the water. And I found one. And so I was putting together all my furniture, and I was listening to a podcast while I was putting all my furniture together in my brand new office. And I was listening to a podcast that is a wonderful podcast about like money and money abundance. But the woman that she was interviewing was this woman that is a sacred feminine priestess. And she talked about, at the time, her community that she was running was called Holy Woman. Her name is Sarah Jenks. And I just like was so glued to everything that she was saying. And I was just like, this is exactly the place that I need to be. I never really thought about spirituality that much. I feel like I was always kind of, I know a lot of people don't like to say woo-woo, but I feel like for people that are not in the space, that's the only way I can put it, that people kind of know what you mean. I kind of liked alternative things, but it wasn't really in the forefront of my mind. But I was like, this is for me. So I joined that community, and I did the big retreat that she holds every year. And I was just like, this is it. This is exactly what I was missing in the clinical work that I was doing. I felt like there was just more. There was more that I was seeing and feeling like putting people in categories based on diagnostic criteria wasn't exactly what I felt like I was meant to do, that I was seeing through the veil, I guess, of what is working in that world and what isn't working in that world. I just felt like a lot of people are experiencing what we call symptoms, but it was more like they're trying to fit themselves into a world that isn't actually supporting them to be the person that they want to be, or to be the family that they want to be. And especially for women. I mean, we are so steeped in so many narratives that don't let us be our full, true, empowered selves. And I would say that for men too. It really, we just live in a society, as I say now, that doesn't support life. So I felt like pairing the sacred with the clinical was kind of that way to bridge something into kind of a more like global and holistic way of looking at it, instead of it being so clinical, and really seeing how we're not just, like working on anxiety or working on depression or working on like couple issues. It's like we're actually working on how do we liberate ourselves from these patriarchal scripts and conditioning, and really come back to our own power, come back to our own sovereignty, come back to like trusting in ourselves again, and trusting that we know what is best for us and our bodies. And that doesn't mean that we can't like learn new things and bounce ideas off of each other, but we're so taught to externalize everything and to seek guidance outside of ourselves and trust in others before we trust in ourselves. And I think that is the biggest work for women, is to like really come back to us and our bodies and trust that we have that wisdom. I've been in a journey of learning about the sacred feminine for the last couple years. And in October of last year, I said yes to starting my own priestess training. That is through the same lineage that Sarah Jenks went through. It's called Priestess Presence, and it is more of like a Celtic, like European lineage of priestess work. It looks a lot at like different understandings of Christianity too. Like we learn a lot about like Mary Magdalene and different understandings of Jesus and Mary, and how there also were priestesses in the Bible, and how some of these stories have been twisted a little bit to conform again more to patriarchal ways of thinking versus maybe how they actually were. So it's been great. And so I've really enjoyed this process and getting to learn more about how I can bring like more ceremony and more ritual into the work that I'm doing, and how I can help women again connect back to themselves and men. I do love working with women, but I also work with men too. And I really again have a mission to help people heal themselves and come back into their full power so that we can change the world.
What really strikes me about your story is that, from the sounds of it, my impression is that you were raised in a matriarchy, you were around women, you were empowered, you were uplifted. And I feel like so many people, myself included, did not have that experience. There's a lot of shame out there, and shame around the body, shame around pleasure. And then I also think about the sacred aspect of it. You mentioned the woo-woo part. I do think the spiritual side, whether or not you look at that as a religious experience or just an embodied experience or something else, I think for a lot of people, that's the missing point, right? It's a missing connection, because people are like these balloon heads floating with a body that's coming along after it. And what I see a lot in my sex coaching practice is that disconnection and the fear and the shame that are brewing into this perfect storm. Now, I did want to ask you, when we spoke before, you mentioned the 5 barriers of desire. And so can you explain to our listeners what they are, and also what's the one that comes up the most that you see in your practice?
I think the one that I see the most that you just kind of hinted at is the body. I think there's so much stuff wrapped up into how we feel about our bodies, how we feel in our bodies, how we often are not in our bodies, because just as you said, we've tended to be in this place in society where we only work pretty much from the neck up. I think that is one of the limitations with talk therapy. It doesn't mean that there aren't people that are doing somatic therapy and trying to get us back more into the body, but I just think the traditional way of doing talk therapy, it doesn't quite get deep enough into really feeling what's in your body. And yes, so many women, and again, a lot of men, but so many women tend to just live in their heads, and it doesn't help them to experience the pleasure that they want when they're so disconnected from their bodies and maybe feel so much shame. There might be trauma that is involved, that they tend to kind of just float above their body, or are afraid to really feel the intensity of what they can feel, or there's an embarrassment and again shame around their body, so they don't want to be exposed to their partner, and that stops them from being able to experience pleasure. So there's just so much around our relationships to our bodies that I feel like is one of the biggest barriers. I think like anxiety and just kind of like internal barriers, anxiety, depression, again, trauma can definitely be barriers. I've definitely worked with a lot of women that have trauma backgrounds and have had to work on, trauma in their vulva or vagina, and even may seek like pelvic floor PT around that, because we tend to get very tight muscles if we have a lot of trauma, because we're trying to protect ourselves from being hurt again. And then we have to like learn how to like open ourselves up again and relax that area again. So I think those can be barriers. So those are like internal barriers. Then there can be external barriers around like the dynamics in their relationship and kind of the roles that they feel like they have to play in society, or like as a mom or as a business person or like someone in, you know, your workspace, or all the roles and things that women take on. And especially the fact that a lot of women carry the mental load in their households and tend to be like the project managers of their households.
So true.
It doesn't make for a body that is at rest enough to experience pleasure, and also makes it so it feels like oftentimes they're more in the care space with the people in their lives versus in a place where they feel cared for and like open to receiving. So I do work with people a lot, especially couples, on just the dynamics that they are having and how they're able to communicate with each other, and how, again, that kind of comes back to the power and like living in your sovereignty of like, how do we speak our truth? How do we say the things that we need without the guilt and shame of actually voicing those things? How do we like, you know, put some expectations on our partner, or say like, I'm not going to do the things that I used to do, and that's going to have to be okay with the dynamic that's happening. So like creating an environment that supports them being able to, again, like let go a little bit and surrender, I think is so important, because again, so many of us have been in these spaces where we feel so constrained and tight, and like we have to control everything. And especially just in a world where women are not really safe enough, and we're constantly feeling the threat of something bad happening to us or our bodies or to our children, that again, it breeds this constriction in our bodies, and we're not able to like fully let ourselves open up and let go. And that's hard. That's really hard when we live in the world that we do. And yet that's part of this work, is being able to like be open enough to receive the pleasure that we want.
What's coming up for me, and just thinking about the clients I see in my practice, is the one side of it is what I learned that it's called in sex coaching is spectatoring. So this idea of, for our listeners who haven't heard that term before, essentially when you're being romantic, having sex, whatever, this idea of you getting caught up in your head and almost like you're outside of your body watching yourself and criticizing yourself. Oh, I'm making that face. Look at my fat rolls. Or thinking about the 528 other things that you need to do, right? Because women wear so many hats. And I think it's about feeling safe enough in your body that you can relax enough to really enjoy the pleasure. Kayla, I know you'll back me up here, but we know as professionals in the sexual health realm that when you're stuck in your head, you're not in your body, and it's so much harder to experience an orgasm or really enjoy the pleasure that's going on because you're so caught up here.
And if you would allow me to go into kind of the sacred feminine space, one of the pillars of what I work on right now, I'm really passionate about weaving what we call the divine feminine and divine masculine back into what it means to be human. And those are two archetypal energies. They are not based on gender roles. It is more about what is the energy of the divine feminine, what is the energy of the divine masculine, and how do they come into sacred union. And something that I thought was really radical when I started exploring this was the fact that the divine masculine is actually supposed to be here to hold safety. And again, it's not based on gender roles, but if we think of how we see masculine energy in the world and how it so much is not holding safety and not holding the feminine and allowing, you know, a lot of feminine energy to like fully be flourished and explored and like wild and do her creative magic thing. And it's just like, it's so foreign to think that masculine energy is actually supposed to be there to hold the safety. And I like to talk about the divine masculine, divine feminine as like a campfire. So if you think of a campfire that has like stones or maybe bricks around it, the bricks or the stones are the masculine, and it's there to be grounded, like it's part of the earth. They're there to create the safety boundary, but it's not coming up over and squashing the flame and putting it out. It's just there to hold it and to create a safe space around it so that other, things are not getting burnt or, the fire is spreading. It's just holding the safe container. And then the fire gets to be her wild, feminine, creative, potential energy self. And they work together in harmony. Like one cannot work without the other. So we all have these energies within each one of us. We're all created from a sperm and an egg. So it's not just like women only have feminine energy and men only have masculine energy. We all have both within us. And it's interesting to also think of that, of like, if somebody like myself feels more feminine, what is it like to think about kind of your masculine energy and how has that led in your life, or how has it squashed your feminine in times? We definitely have lived in a world that is very hyper masculine energy forward. And so I think most of us can still grow in our feminine energy, men included. But I just think it's so interesting to think of like, we really need a world that holds safety. And I 100% agree with what you're saying, that most of everything we talk about around sex comes back to, do we feel safe? Do we feel like we're in a space where, again, we feel safe enough to let go and allow ourselves to, be in the moment, to experience the full sensation of what's going on in our body, to lead, to follow, to do, all the different dynamics that we can. But it all stems from a place of, I feel safe inside myself. And then if you're with a partner, I feel safe with my partner too. So yeah, I think safety is probably the number one thing that we need to talk about when it comes to sex and intimacy.
I am curious though. I mean, the safety, 100% agreed. That's paramount. But what about the listener who feels disconnected from their spirituality?
Mm-hmm.
How can they connect with the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine in a way that's accessible to them when maybe they don't connect with that spiritual side in practice?
And I think the great thing about the spiritual spaces that I've been in is like, it's not how we think of religion or spirituality in the sense of, you have to think this way, it's all or nothing type thing. That there's plenty of people in this space that still, are Christian or are any other religious denomination and still find through threads of the sacred feminine or sacred masculine within that. So that being said, like if you already have something that makes sense to you, I think this can pair very nicely with it. And if you don't, that's okay. I think it's also, for me, a lot of it is just thinking about, no matter whether you are spiritual or not, like we are all on a spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. We are all like souls, I believe in souls that are in bodies. And being a mother myself and having grown like a human in my body, it's just amazing how we are even here. And like, what has to happen to create a human is just absolutely insane. So even if you look at it from like a scientific standpoint, like we are like trillions of cells collected together that all have a job and all know how to like function as a human being, which also blows my mind. So I think I believe that we are connected very much to the earth. Like, we are not just things that walk on the earth. We are part of the earth, and we are all very much connected to each other and to whatever brought us here, whatever you want to believe is a higher power or source, like whatever created the universes and all, or the galaxies and all the, things out in space that we love to talk about and theorize about. So you can come at it from so many different angles, but I met a woman who had written a book that talked about like all different spiritual teachings and so many different like cultural backgrounds, and really put it all into like one chart and looked at all the through lines through all different spiritual teachings and different religious backgrounds. And it's like, we're all basically saying the same thing, just in different ways and just in the ways that make sense to that culture at the time. So I think, again, it really doesn't matter like what you believe. It just matters that you feel like there is something more than just you, because I do think that that is something that is innately human, is that we want to be connected. We are social beings. We want to be connected to each other, and we want to feel like there is purpose. All these like existential questions of like, why are we here? And what are we doing? And why does life matter? Those all come to be spiritual questions. I think that's why we have religion, is because we want to know, we want to understand, like, why does it even matter that we're here? So I know that got like really big, really fast, but I just think like we're all trying to understand these things in different ways. And so if this one way doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. And I just want you to find a space that fits you and helps you understand more of, how do I connect to the things that are bigger than me and feel like I have a place and a path and feel like I belong somewhere? Because that's really also what we want, is we want belonging, we want community. And I think a lot of those questions get answered in the spiritual realm.
I really loved how you were explaining it and connecting it. And what's coming up for me is that it really goes back to connecting with the self. And I think that, like, I think of the phrase human being and human doing, and myself included, I'm guilty of this, of getting into that doing zone where you're just like checking things off the list and like this, that, and the other thing. And we are so separated from being, breathing, connecting with our body, just taking a couple breaths and just having a moment where we're not connected or having to do things for other people.
Yeah.
Kayla, you mentioned that masculine creates safety, and that the feminine is more expressive and free. So how does that actually play out in relationships?
Currently, not very well. We're still in a space where I think we're trying to figure it out. In the spiritual spaces that I'm a part of, I see a through line, and I think a lot of other people are seeing this, where we are really in a time of feminine rising. And again, that's for everyone, not just for women, but I would say especially for women, because unfortunately, being the ones that are kind of the oppressed in society, we've had to do our work. We've been doing our work. We've been figuring out, how do I survive this world that doesn't really love that I'm in it, especially right now. I think it's interesting how things are shifting and changing. And I don't think all men are being caught off guard, but I do think a lot of men that haven't done much internal work are kind of being thrown off by a lot of women right now that are saying, I'm no longer going to put up with the shit that I've been putting up with before. I'm stepping into my power. I'm going to go do the thing that I really want to do, regardless of what my partner says. Like, these more patriarchal roles that couples have been taking on, I think are starting to get dismantled. And again, the spiritual understanding of like, as above, so below, as within, so without, or vice versa, we're seeing all of these things crumble in our society. And I think it's the same thing that's happening in our relationships too. From my standpoint, it's for the better, but it's a hard process to go through while you're doing it. I've worked with a few couples recently that are really going through it because things are shifting and changing, and there's some growing pains there, and people are either going to work to fix it and figure it out together, or they're not. And that's okay too. Sometimes relationships do end, but I think at least the men that I'm hearing from are having a hard time right now of like, why is this all of a sudden happening? And now I'm kind of left flat-footed, not really understanding why my partner is really demanding something different that they haven't before. And, again, it's an invitation for everyone to think about, what do we want? How do we want to live more authentically? How do we want to look at our lives less from obligation and less from, again, doing and like, I have to just do, or do what is expected of me at all times, and think more about like, yeah, who do I want to be? What is the person that I want to be? And how do I align the doing with that? How do I align the doing with the being that I want? And again, like sometimes that means that the relationships end because of that. So I think the people that can work through it are the people that, one, have, again, safety in the relationship to say, hey, I need a change. I need something that is not what we have now. And how do we like work on that together? And how do we like both continue to grow in ourselves? I think just, again, I'm kind of making blanket statements, but I think men in general have had very low standards of what it means to do their own internal work. And I've worked with like such great men. I like love working with men, but I think in terms of being in specifically heterosexual relationships, of course, there's so many other versions of relationships, but I think men have just kind of lagged behind in doing the inner work and figuring out their own internal state and like, again, moving in a more aligned direction. And now women are like, I'm doing it. Like, whether you come with me or not, I'm doing it. So it's a lot. It's a lot that people are experiencing. So if you're resonating with that out there, I hear you. And I'm also going through a version of that in my own relationship too, of just not wanting the reality that we have to be what it is anymore. I don't want like work to be the focus on everything, and everything else just kind of takes a back seat if, somebody has to like put in really long hours at work and has to like change their whole routine and, make everyone else kind of figure it out because work says I have to. I've been an entrepreneur for a while, but it's hard when it's like, I want something different, but that's not quite what is the reality at this point. So it's just a lot. It's a lot of change. It's a lot of us like trying to figure out, how are we going to handle all of this, and how do we want to birth this into reality?
I'm speaking to women right now when I say this, but I think men as well. I think there's some fear around asking for what we want and being too demanding. And I think for a lot of people, like earlier when you were saying about like demanding stuff, I don't think that anybody just wakes up one day and is like, okay, we're going to change all of these things. I think it's under the surface for a long time before it ever comes out. And then if it takes too long, it can almost be like a pressure cooker situation where it explodes out rather than trickles.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I think one thing that I also feel very deeply for myself, but I think is probably one of the underlying needs here that maybe doesn't have words to it, is I think for so long, again, total generalization, but I think for so long we've just expected men to be in this role where they are physically being the provider and physically doing the protecting. And I think a lot of women, and just as a society, we are really asking for the masculine to, again, like hold the safety, not only physically, but also like emotionally and spiritually, coming in and taking some of that mental load off the plate, and also like doing some of the internal, either therapeutic or spiritual work to really understand themselves and not putting that on their partners. Like so many women tend to be the therapist in their relationship because, again, society has taught men not to really understand their feelings. So it's not really their fault, but they've been so divorced from their feelings for so long that they end up relying on a partner to kind of help them figure themselves out. And it's a lot. It's a lot on a relationship. So I think there is this need for the masculine in all of us to like grow, and also the feminine to feel like she can be free again and be creative. I've worked with a couple that like their biggest thing, again, it was around the workspace and both people feeling like so pigeonholed in the things that they had to do that they felt like they had no time for the things that they really wanted to do. They were like yearning to have time to like explore their hobbies and do the things that they really wanted to do, but felt like this 9 to 5 plus grind was not really allowing them to do that. And that's the feminine. It's like she wants to be free. She wants to be creative. She wants to have the space and the time to like go be wild and figure out the different things that she's excited about. It was both partners feeling that. And so I just feel like there's this yearning for more freedom to do the things that we want to do versus the things that we have to do.
So how do we find the time to do the things that we want to do, Kayla?
I think it's different for everyone. It's different for everyone's circumstances, but I do think that it comes from, again, speaking our truth and really getting honest with ourselves of like, where are we putting our time and energy? And I mean, as I've said so far, I have a big gripe with just work culture in general, and really feel like as a society, especially in the US, like we really have to work on that and get to a place where people aren't just like living to work, but instead of, using work as a just small piece of the pie that allows us to then do the other things that we want. So again, we're working against a societal structure that doesn't work for really anyone except the billionaires at this point. So I totally get that. Making sure that you are, taking even small moments for yourself is so important. Again, it's so different for everyone, but I think we have certain expectations of what things are supposed to be. And I think trying to really look at like, what are my belief systems that trickle into how I'm actually making decisions about the things that I am doing within a day? And are there areas that I can maybe start to unravel some of that and understand, like, why do I feel like I have to do this at this specific time? Is there any wiggle room that I can carve out some extra time to like really devote to something that I really want to do? And again, like making it a priority, I think is really important. I think the things that we tend to have a passion for, we tend to put on the back burner and feel like, well, I'll just get to that when, XYZ happens. And I think if we can bring it to the forefront and really look at, okay, if this is really something that I want to do, how can I make that happen? Like where are the spaces that I can make that happen? How do I get support for that to happen? I think a lot of it also is probably like asking for help and asking for somebody to come like watch your kiddo for a little bit, or, again, asking your partner, like, can you take this over so that I have a little bit more free time to go do this thing over here? I think there's always ways to work around it. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's not going to create some challenges. But I do think that, at least in the spiritual space, there's a really clear calling to start to even just bit by bit do things that are more aligned with our hearts, like coming to this feeling of we are connected through our hearts and we are connected to our feminine through our creativity. And how do we start to just pick up one thing here and there that allows us to come back to that place in ourselves? Because that also is where we live in joy. And joy is definitely right next to pleasure. And when we're able to do more things that are in those spaces that bring joy and pleasure, it's a lot easier to then bridge that into sexual pleasure too. If we're creating those little pockets and little moments within our life instead of, pleasure being rooted only into the sexual space. So, yeah, I think it's really just looking at your life and saying, where can I make it happen?
Yeah, and pleasure is more than sex. Pleasure can be petting your cat, it could be eating your favorite meal, it could be calling your mom or your friend or your sister or having sex too. So that when I was listening to you, it reminded me of a conversation I had the other day with one of my friends, and we were talking about morning routines and like brushing your teeth and journaling and like all of that. And she shared something really interesting with me. And she said that her morning routine is when she wakes up, she thinks to herself, okay, what do I want to feel today? What do I want to think about today? How does my body feel? Where am I feeling emotion? And then, of course, the spiritual side of it too. And making it about being curious, I think, is a really big thing as well, because so many of us are regimented and we have all of these things we do, and you pick up the kids and then you make dinner and then yada, yada, yada. And I think what you said about delegating is so important. And I think that women especially can be terrible at that because they just think they have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Delegate some stuff so that you have space to explore your pleasure and your hobbies and those little things that light you up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, again, like finding community in it can be really helpful if are interested in certain things, like finding a circle that's already doing that you can join so you have other people to enjoy it with. I love singing. That's one of my biggest
Me too.
loves. Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I did musical theater for 12 years. I love
Oh
to
my
sing.
gosh.
Stimulates your vagus nerve, so that's going to make you
Yes.
feel better too.
Yes, absolutely. So I do voice lessons where I do mostly individual, but then once a month we have a group lesson and I sing with a group of other women and we practice performing in front of each other. And it's just, there's so many things that I feel like are so much better when you're in a group, or like, if you're interested in the sacred feminine and joining a community like that, it's a lot more fun to learn about spirituality in a group setting. So if there's something that you want to learn, you can also take a class or something like that. So it's not something that you just have to do on your own. I also, yes, wanted to touch on the fact that you said pleasure can be anything. It could be like going outside and standing in the sun for a couple minutes with like bare feet on the grass. It could be, instead of I have to make dinner, I have to like clean this thing and fold laundry. It could be like, I'm just going to pause for 5 to 10 minutes and go just like roll around and actually play with my kiddo and just like be present in this moment. You can be like turning music on and having like a spontaneous dance party for a moment or two. So I think, again, just like you said, we can be very regimented and feel like this is what this has to also look like when I'm doing something. So I'm a big proponent of like putting stuff down and going and just being present. But if you also want to like bring some whimsy to whatever you are doing, like putting on some music or like wearing something that's fun and flowy, or bringing some flowers inside and experiencing like a specific aroma, or having a favorite mug that you have tea in every day, or just like something that brings a little something extra to the routine that you already have, can also bring pleasure into your day too. So I think there's lots of different ways that we can experience pleasure, but then yes, if we're talking specifically about like creating something new in your life or bringing time into your life where you can do a creation, then yeah, delegating, making the time where you can, and yeah, maybe trying to find a community to do it into.
Yeah. And I'm actually in a couple women's circles here in the Washington, D.C. area. And
Yeah.
it has been such a beautiful experience to really be able to connect with women and to feel so vulnerable, but safe at the
Yes.
same time.
Yeah.
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 So, listeners, if you're in the DC area and you're looking for a women's circle, reach out. And of course, if you're in Washington State and you're looking, let Kayla know, reach out to her.
Yes.
Kayla, before we wrap it up today, we always do a little rapid fire question here on Sip with Summer. So, I'd love to ask you a couple questions and you just give me your first thing that comes to your head that works for you.
Sure.
All right. So, what's one belief about sex you wish every woman would unlearn?
I think that we have to do anything in a specific way, or we have to be a specific type of person to have sex. I feel like so many women have this belief system around like, it has to be like this, or I have to be like this temptress that is like coaxing my partner into a sexual experience and feel very intimidated by that. And I think just again, like being able to just play with it a little bit and bring it into a play space and experience it for more of like, yeah, how can I be creative with this? How can I allow myself to like actually just say the words like, I would like to have sex today, or I want to do this specific thing with you. Can that be something that we try together? That I think we've been sold these narratives around what it has to look like, probably from the movies and all the different media that we experienced growing up. And so I think it would just be great if we could unlearn the need to like be, I guess what I'm trying to say is be perfect. If we could unlearn the perfectionism around sex or what it needs to be sexy, or like, again, like the perfectionism around like what a sexy body is and how we need to show up in that space. If we could just know, like, just being ourselves and being authentic to who we are and allowing it to be more playful and creative, I think that could help a lot of people.
So true. Yeah, that reminds me. I made a post on Facebook and Instagram today about being plus size and attraction and desire and all of that. And gosh, we could do a whole episode just on that topic. But
Oh, yeah.
I think what women need to unlearn is that they don't need to feel pressure to perform.
Mhm.
And also that they can be sexual beings, that they don't have to be timid, that sex is not for the man. Sex can
Yeah.
also be for them too, that there can
Right.
be this mutual enjoyment of everybody. And that doesn't make you a slut or a whore or anything like that. It's just
Yeah.
pleasure and satisfaction and enjoyment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next one, Kayla. What's one simple way a woman can reconnect with her body this week?
I think being able to just like put your hands on your body and allow yourself to like experience your body through your own touch can be so helpful. I really like to talk about being able to like touch yourself and think about being the person that's touching you and how it feels to like touch, and then also what it feels like to be touched, like what the skin underneath your touch feels like too. So kind of going back and forth of like, how does it feel to be touched versus to actually touch? Finding that safety within yourself is so important first before pairing that with a partner. And so, just like you had mentioned, like coming back to our breath, coming back to the present moment, if you like meditation, or again, we're in a time where I think most everywhere is going to be pretty sunny and warm coming up. So, getting outside, getting out in the sunshine, feeling yourself like being in the outdoors and feeling like sun on your skin, again, if you're somebody that has like grass nearby, being able to like put some bare feet in the grass and just like experiencing your body, like being out in the world, I think can be really helpful. If you're feeling down, like actually giving yourself a hug and like feeling yourself, like holding yourself
That.
would be a great way to just like love on yourself a little bit.
Thanks for that invitation as I sit here hugging myself and like rubbing my arm and making myself feel good. And I have a daily practice, unless it's raining or snowy or the weather's bad,
Yeah.
where I go outside barefoot. I have grass in my backyard and I stand there and I look for where the sun is. And I do this like little, like hands up and just having that few minutes, it really makes a difference. My answer, though, of one simple way a woman can connect with her body this week would be mindful showering. And it's a practice I started doing every time I take a shower. I'm very mindful about it. So I'm really thinking about how I'm cleansing my body, how I'm rubbing the washcloth on my skin, taking a couple extra minutes washing my face just to really massage my face and give myself a little massage, kind of how you were explaining touching yourself or hugging yourself. And also when I'm going through something, life happens to all of us. And I really like to imagine that whatever is pulling me down or hurting me or making me feel any type of negative emotion, that it's rinsing off of me, it's going down the drain, and that when I step out of the shower, I'm leaving that stuff behind.
Yeah.
Now, does it work every time? No, but it certainly makes me feel better than I did.
Yeah.
And sometimes it does work. Sometimes you can trick yourself into it, but it's just a little simple thing that I figure we all bathe every day. Most of us do anyway. And so why not just be a little more mindful about it? Okay. Last rapid fire closing question. What does pleasure is your birthright actually look like in daily life?
I think claiming it as something that is non-negotiable. That again, coming back to like the little pleasures in life of smells and things that we wear and being out in nature and being present with the people that we love in our life and having moments of stillness with ourselves. Like all those little pleasures in life are so important and so needed and often get lost in our like busy day-to-day lives. And then bridging that into sexual pleasure, again, like being your own advocate around that. And if you are struggling and need help, like that's totally normal and okay. And, that's why we both are here. So, ask for help when you need it. But if you, are not having the experiences in your own life or in your own relationship that you would like to have, then I think, having the courage to say something about it. And I've actually had a lot of like colleagues of mine that had kind of like, for lack of better phrasing, like come to Jesus moments with their partners of like, I want more. I want more than what I'm getting. And it can be really scary because we don't know how another person is going to react. But in those circumstances, it turned out really well. And they've been able to like work more on their sexual relationship because of that. So I think, again, yeah, just like claiming it as something that is your right to have and then taking baby steps towards that, whatever that looks like. It doesn't have to, be mind-blowing, amazing sex tomorrow, but it can be like starting the process of even, again, like coming into your own body and feeling safe in your own body or having a conversation with your partner about what you would like to be different. So, yeah, I think allowing pleasure to just be like something that is always part of your life is important.
Kayla, thank you so much. Where can everyone find you, Kayla, and work with you?
So I have a circle coming up that is on Zoom, and it's called the Holy Rage Circle. This is a circle that I specifically made kind of for myself, but also for anyone else out there that really feels like the weight of the world right now, feels what's happening either out there or again in their own lives, And there's a lot of like sacred rage that I think is coming up in the collective right now. Again, as I think the feminine kind of rises, we have a lot to release and purge that has been there for so long that we're like no longer wanting to accept. Circle kind of takes you through a somatic experience of going into grief and rage. We'll do some grounding. We'll have some people spotlighted if you are so courageous to do so, to speak about what's going on for you and really be witnessed and held in that. And then we'll be listening to either me sing or playing some music that will really take us into some grief spaces, some rage spaces. But we're not going to stay there. We're going to what we call alchemize or turn it into also joy and pleasure. So we go really deep into the hard stuff, and then we bridge it into something that is more about joy and pleasure and just feeling fully alive. And from that place, then we're also going to cast a vision of what we want differently to happen either in your own life or in the world, and really just be like beacons for love and light out in the world as well. If that sounds like something that you would like to experience and to do, it will be on Zoom on June 30th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I will send the link over so that can be put in the show notes. It's been a really fun experience I've done it in person, and this will be my first time doing it online because I have a lot of people that have been interested but aren't in my local area. So I really want to open it up to anyone that feels like that's something that would be aligned with them. And it's for all genders. I feel like with the privacy of kind of being in your own home and being in your own space, I do want to open it up to all genders because there have been a few men that were like, oh, that would be fun, but I was just doing women in person. If you're open to like being in a community of people that are going to actually say in the beginning, we're going to make this a confidential space and we're going to make this a safe space, but that all want to really move through these emotions together. That's your invitation. And then if you want to follow me more, I have my own podcast called Liberation Wisdom that you can find on all major platforms. And then you could also join my newsletter that's also called Liberation Wisdom. And I'll send that link to put in the show notes as well.
So I will have all of Kayla's info in the show notes. You can follow her, check out her circle, and just stay connected with what she has going on.
Yeah.
Kayla, thank you so much for your time today. And I really loved this conversation. And I know it's going to resonate so much with our listeners. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me. I love having conversations with you.
If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend who needs to hear this, because these are conversations that we should have been having all along.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Sip with Summers, where we laughed, learned, and probably said clitoris more times than your high school health teacher ever did. If you liked what you heard, be a gem and leave a review. Share it with your favorite group chat, or send it to that friend who really needs to hear this. You know the one. For more tips, tools, and slightly inappropriate jokes, follow me on social or head to summersoflove.com. Until next time, stay curious, stay turned on, and as always, keep sipping.